Welcome back to another reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam in our stream of Bhakti with today again Brihat up in Sharanagati, about 4 hours north or northeast of Vancouver, right in the heart of the fire crisis that's been going on in BC. But Brihat, you're still finding time to join me here. I really appreciate it. And have things kind of cooled down a bit up there for you?
We had another small fire in the right in the valley, but I would say we've kind of got a little bit of a response team here now, uh, getting outfitted, and it was put out fairly quick. And then last night it rained really good, and it's kind of cool. So it's definitely cooled down over the past few days.
When you say a small fire, I'm thinking like a little bonfire or something. But when you
Probably a bit
sent that,
bigger than that, but
yeah, you sent that picture of the fire, behind you or behind somebody there. It was massive.
yeah, yeah,
Forest fire.
yeah.
So glad to hear that you're safe up there. We're continuing on in this chapter is called Krishna's entrance into Dwarka. So we're still talking about how he's arriving back on the scene in the city. So this is the city that I guess we didn't really talk about that so much. It's a city that he specifically built, and that gets discussed later. And it's off at the time it was kind of like off the coast a bit, right, of India.
Yeah,
And I guess its legend has it that it sunk into the ocean.
that's the legend, and yeah,
And then isn't it that there were some archaeologists who somehow discovered remnants of this city under the water off the coast of India?
I'm sure just go on
Yeah,
YouTube and type in Dwarka,
yeah,
hidden Dwarka or whatever, something like that. You'll find something.
yeah. So apparently it was a really beautiful city, and that's where Krishna is returning to. So let me chant a few mantras and we'll just dive in. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in darkness, and my spiritual teachers opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respects unto them. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayat. Before reciting this Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respects unto the Supreme Personality, Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Srila Vyasadeva we met at the very beginning of the Bhagavatam. And I was just thinking, this mantra, Om Jnana Timarandasya, I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my teachers opened my eyes. In my mind, I think I've got a ways to go before my eyes are opened yet. But I like the spirit of the mantra is just to offer that respect to the past teachers, right? So we're on text 15. Anything you want to say from last week, Brihat, before we just get into it?
I think this is just this is the last text and a little theme here of just describing the how the city looked, and specifically in these verses how the city looked when receiving Krishna back from he was in Hastinapur. So and this will come up a little bit, I think, two texts from now, but there's just in the culture that's presented in the Bhagavatam, it's just everything is very nothing's random. Like there's a purpose behind everything. So like all these different things that are being described, they're like they're purposeful, and they're like, it's not like people just like decorated, like everything had a specific meaning and whatnot. So we're just hearing a little bit about these different things.
Why don't you go ahead and read
No,
the?
no, no, no plastic mentioned.
Yeah, right, right. All natural, beautiful productions of nature.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Why
okay,
don't
I can.
yeah, you go ahead and start reading the translation.
Okay. In each and every door of the residential houses, auspicious things like curd, unbroken fruits, sugarcane, and full water pots with articles for worship, incense, and candles were all displayed. I'm guessing curd means yogurt, probably
Mm-hmm.
like pots of yogurt.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
And that
then the
would have
common.
been that would have been auspicious. There's that word auspicious again, right? Or that's the one we were trying to
Yeah.
figure out a different word for. It's like it means it represents good fortune or something. And the reason why
Yes.
a pot of yogurt would have been there like that is because it indicates that they were caring for cows.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right? They
Nice.
would have had like some what we would call like a goshala or some place where they would actually have a place for the cows to be cared for in the right way, like in every way. Cows were and still are considered to be very must be very carefully cared for so that they're very happy.
Yeah, our friend, one of the people who lives in the community who recently moved here, he's from India. He's actually, I mentioned him before, he's from close to Dwarka, which
Mm.
we're talking about now. And he grew up on a farm in India, and they had cows. And like he was telling us, like the cows are considered members of the family. So like they care for them like up until death, just like you care for your like grandparents or something like that. Like they had one bull, I think he was mentioning, and every day he had to go and he had to like turn him over and like do a whole bunch of stuff. And at that point the bull is not contributing much anymore to the, but because they consider them part of the family and they've contributed so much during their life, then they treat them like equally as a family member. Like you can tell when you talk to him, there's no like thought in his mind like that this is a lesser creature, lesser than a human being. Like it's these, they see them as equally a part of the family.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
nice.
What one of the things like that struck me about cows that are protected like that, like in India, it was in Mayapur, and you know how they have the place where the cows live. Like at that time, it was a little bit out of the compound of the Mayapur itself, and
Mhm.
they had like an area where there was a fence that divided the road from where the cows were. And I went and I was walking by, and these cows are beautiful. Like they're not their features are different than the cows that we see mostly in Canada. They're
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
almost like deer, actually. Their features of their
Yeah.
face are very very fine, and so there was like a whole group of cows that were quite a distance away from the fence. But I was just walking by, and I just leaned up against. I just kind of like put my arms up on the fence and I just wanted to watch them just to see. They were really beautiful animals to look at. And so as I stood there, then one of them put their head up and kind of noticed me there. And then a few of them noticed. And then within a few moments, they were all just trotting over to the fence just to check me out. And the whole group just kind of came over to the fence and they were kind of poking their nose at me, like zero fear. There wasn't even a thought of
Yeah,
fear in
yeah,
their
yeah.
minds, right? They were just curious, like, what's this well, who's this creature over there on the fence? They wanted to come check me out. But you know, it's a much different experience than like, because the cows here, I mean, there's so many differences, but one is that they're just so filled with fear. And you experience that, I'm sure. Do they still
Yeah.
have the ranch cows up there going through the valley sometimes?
Yeah, so we see
Yeah.
this contrast very, it's like very in our face because we have one of the members of our community, they have like 6 cows, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's also the cows that are belong to ranchers, that they just wander through the valley and they graze, and then they throughout the whole summer. So yeah, those cows are they're very afraid of humans, and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't get near them. But the cows that the members of the community here have, same thing, like no fear. It's just like it's a total world of difference. And cows are very it's very nice to be around cows, but they're very caring. Like they'll actually come, and like the cows will start licking you, like like a mother, like taking care of somebody. Like they have a very caring nature, and so yeah, it's really pleasant actually to be around cows. We've had a few kirtans with like where the cows are, and it's a really nice, like the cows create a really cows that are protected, they create it's a really beautiful atmosphere,
Mm.
auspicious, right? that's
Yeah,
the
right,
that's
right.
the point here.
Yeah, yeah. They embody the mode of goodness, right? Cows.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you can feel it. Like I've been, we had a cat here, we had a cat, and being around, like, say, a cat or a dog, or being around a cow, you can really feel the difference, like the kind of atmosphere they create. And cows it's really pleasant. It's quite calming actually.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have I was in where was that? It was in Washington State, just south, and they I was at a university there, and they had in the university, in the like, they've got these big areas that are outside, like there was a fountain there and stuff, like between the buildings where students would pass going this way and that way towards their classes. It was kind of a big area, and they had a bunch of farm animals that they had brought to help students de-stress. They could come up, and like there was a cow, they could pet a cow, or there was, I can't even
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
what,
yeah.
can't even remember what the animals were now. It was quite a few years ago, but it was just going and just being near the animals was therapeutic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Nice. Yeah, so this is the kind of, I like what you said, no fear. This is kind of the atmosphere that's being described here, is an atmosphere
Yeah.
like all these things are creating this kind of like atmosphere of no fear, and yeah,
You know
other
what? This is
very,
just on this point.
very,
Like, this might be a bit of a tangent, but it's like something to keep in mind as we go through this chapter, maybe. But like this thing about no fear, like it's just so significant in the relationship with the cow. It's like night and day, right? It makes all the difference in terms of the relationship that's possible with that creature, the amount of fear that's
yeah,
present, right?
yeah, yeah,
So, I mean, now it's the same. I mean, it's not the same, but this is the thought I'm having here, is that carry that over into our relationship with the divine. You know,
mm,
like there's many portrayals of, especially when you get into like a personality behind the divine, which is very much where we're going here. This is like Krishna, and so in Western traditions or religions that talk about like a personal form, there's so much fear that's woven into it. And it,
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
because I mean, so do you. We both come from like religious kind of backgrounds, and it really impacts the relationship with the divine. I mean, just as significantly as it does with the cows, right? Like what's the
Yeah.
what the possibility
Yeah.
of the relationship and the conceptions of love that can
Right.
arise, you know?
Right. 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 The intimacy that can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just us. Like, even if somebody didn't grow up in a religious environment, like
Uh-huh.
all of Western society is influenced by
Yeah.
um, Western, Christianity, which has this conception of a very, like, fearful kind of personality.
Yeah.
And so it's a societal thing. We're all, and so yeah, we're all affected by it. And the Bhagavatam, and it's actually, it takes some time, but the personality of Krishna, like, it's so different. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to it takes time to actually, like, like, decondition the mind,
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
it,
to undo
yeah.
the triggers.
So
One thing is that
yeah, yeah, really.
and I mean another thing here is the injustice, right? Like if you think about
Right, right,
if you think about those sweet cows that are there, right? In Sharanagati where you are, like what it would take to make those cows like deathly afraid of humans. What it would
right,
take, and like how heartbreaking is that, right? That's just so heartbreaking to think that
right,
that an animal would experience that, so that they're rightfully afraid. And
right,
like, and
right,
so it's also heartbreaking to think of
right,
how
right,
people have developed this, um that this has been imposed upon our relationship with the divine, like in a personal form, that
right,
implies that there's some kind of fear and that kind of mood, which is I consider to be such an injustice. Anyway.
right, right, right. It's a very like, good analogy.
Hmm. Shall we move on? I guess we did that one enough,
Sure.
but let's get into the sweet stuff.
Okay, there's
Okay, so I'm going to read this one.
sure.
Next text. On hearing that Krishna, the most dear Krishna was approaching Dwarka, magnanimous Vasudev. These are names of different people that were in the city, and these are people
Yeah,
who we definitely get to know them, but not in this chapter. It's going to come
yeah,
later, especially in the 10th canto, but they're just mentioned here. So the magnanimous Vasudev, Akrura, Ugrasena, Balaram, the superhumanly powerful, Pradyumna, Charudeshna, and Samba, the son of Jambavati, all extremely happy, abandoned resting, sitting, and dining. Whatever they were doing, they just stopped, got up, and went outside to see Krishna coming. And then in the
I think that's
con-
like
yeah, go ahead.
I think that's like his father, uncle, grandfather, brother, son, or maybe the rest are sons. Anyway, all
Mm,
his kind of like intimate family members.
right, right. And then in the commentary, there are in the commentary there are descriptions of each of these personalities. So the commentary actually goes on for like 4 pages almost of just descriptions of these personalities, which we don't really need to do
Yeah,
right now. Maybe later on. Of course, the question arises: what's the need of Krishna having, like, what when Krishna comes and he has these? Okay, this is an interesting point. Maybe we'll just pause on this for a minute. Like so.
I think it came to my mind too, but I wasn't sure if we're
Yeah.
gonna.
Okay. You go ahead.
Uh, the point is that the supreme person has a father, a brother, a grandfather, right? That's the point. Like, what's
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
on there? The
Why?
the abs the absolute truth, the source of everything.
Mm-hmm.
How is this? So yeah, yeah, good question.
Yeah. You wanna comment on it?
I it's just the that's the conception of the absolute, of the supreme person, is that uh, even though he is, the according to the Bhagavatam, the source of everything, um, he doesn't, and everything, he's the proprietor of everything. He doesn't really care about that. He actually, what he cares about is having relationship with with everybody else. And so he he takes basically, plays a role, and so he has a father, and so he has the relationship of a son with a father, or with son with a mother, or with friends or brothers. And so yeah, he wants to, Krishna is just, yeah, he's just interested in tasting different relationships. That's what that he's not interested in power, opulence, fame. He has all these things. He's the source of all of them. But what really interests him is relationship. So
Nicely said. And these are kind of when like this topic is a whole realm of deep philosophy in the Bhakti tradition, because then it gets into talking about like the different rasas that are available, the different these different relationships are described in great detail, like whether it's friendship,
yeah,
whether it's parental love back and forth, like Krishna experiences parental love in terms of having parents, like and those parents experience love just like parents in this world can relate to the love that they feel for their children. That love can also be directed towards the supreme in like in a tangible
yeah,
relationship. And all the relationships basically that we experience in this world originate from these capacities of Krishna to have these relationships with us. And
yeah.
so,
That's right.
yeah,
That's the
which make,
idea is
yeah,
that's the idea is that all these things, they originate from the spiritual reality, which is what we're hearing about.
and that immediately paints a different picture, right, of the adventure of bhakti, of spiritual relationship
Mhm.
that's there, which is the whole goal, like in bhakti, is just to develop these loving relationships in some particular mood.
I just also want to bring up the point in terms of even in our lives, even if you take spirituality completely out of the picture, um, still relationship is, if we don't learn the science of relationship, like how to have like proper relationship with others, with the world, still that's because this is what Krishna is interested in. It's what he gets happiness from. This is actually where happiness comes. Like, and you can see in Western society, like we go for, like getting the opulent, the wealth, the facility. Okay, now I have a big house, now I have all this. But if we haven't learned how to have relationship, then you have this big house and you have all this, and then the relationships of the people inside, you know if you don't know how to navigate that, then still you won't feel any happiness, even though you have all these things now. So the science, the Vedic culture was very much based more on relationship, how to properly relate with everybody, everything, the animals, all this stuff. It was it's a science. And if it's done properly, actually, there's a lot of satisfaction that comes from that. So even if you take spirituality right out of the picture, still this principle of relationship is what's prominent, and that's based on what we're talking about here, how that's actually what's interesting to the supreme.
Okay, want to read the next verse?
Sure. um they, so that's the persons we just read about, which were Krishna's intimate family members. They hastened toward Krishna on chariots with Brahmins bearing flowers. Before them were elephants, emblems of good fortune. Conch shells and bugles were sounded, and Vedic hymns were chanted. Thus they offered their respects, which were saturated with affection. I just want to read it's a short commentary.
Yeah.
I briefly glanced at it. It says the Vedic way of receiving a great personality creates an atmosphere of respect, which is saturated with affection and veneration for the person received. The auspicious atmosphere of such a reception depends on the paraphernalia described above, including conch shells, flowers, incense, decorated elephants, and the qualified Brahmins reciting verses from the Vedic literatures. Such a program of reception is full of sincerity on the part of both the receiver and the received. It's just, I don't know, it's just like beautiful.
Yeah. Snapshot of culture, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting sentence here. The auspicious atmosphere of such a reception depends on the paraphernalia described above, which was all of these things, including elephants.
Yeah,
But I think what is implied here is that the paraphernalia represent the sincere effort.
yes, right.
And so what's really being said here is that the reception depends on the paraphernalia, in this case, being like, how much endeavor is going on here to receive Krishna all of a sudden.
Right.
There's a lot of sincerity, and it's not just, they're not just feeling sincere, but they're trying to round up everything they possibly can in their environment and make it nice and offer to Krishna in some way as a form of reception.
Yeah.
So I mean, in other words, sincerity implies action.
Yes, yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Good point. And it's that's a really good point. It's just the paraphernalia here, like the elephants and things like that, which are, not easy things to acquire. They're just the physical manifestation of the situation of these people's hearts, of where their consciousness, their sincerity, it's like this is how it's manifesting. So for, us, say a friend's coming, to meet you or something, it may look very different, but the principle can still be. And this is the beautiful thing about Vedic culture, is the principles are what's important, is like, the sincerity, and then the details, how it manifests physically, will be, different depending on a situation. But if we can understand the principles, then we'll know, okay, how to apply in so many different situations.
Exactly. And that's what makes it translatable in today's world,
Yeah,
being
yeah.
able
So
to.
yeah, so yeah, and that's it. I mean, it's a good point, because it's like, how does this relate to us, right?
Mhm.
But if we can read these things and understand the principles that are being applied, the principles are universal. They can, any time, place, circumstance, they can be used.
And here we see, like, the Krishna is being received with a lot of grandeur, like a lot of
Yeah,
magnificent, and it's being described here as their sincerity being expressed, but Krishna also accepts, um, it's not, so to contrast this with an example where the sincerity was there, but the
paraphernalia.
paraphernalia wasn't. I'm thinking about, like, later on we'll read, we it was just mentioned Vidura, right? Vidura was mentioned here, wasn't he? Or was
Yeah,
he not?
yeah. No, he wasn't, but
Okay.
because this is Dwarka, right? So Vidura was in Hastinapur.
Right. So we're gonna meet Vidura later. And there's that occasion when Krishna went to Vidura's home, and so they wanted to receive him like Krishna's being received here, but with articles from their home. And one of the things that they wanted to do was offer Krishna some very nice food. But in her ecstasy, Vidura's wife was peeling very nice bananas for Krishna, and instead of she was just so beside herself in terms of the spiritual happiness that she was feeling, she kind of lost touch with with her immediate situation, and she was putting the banana peels on the plate instead of the actual bananas, and so she served the banana peels to Krishna instead of the bananas as something to eat, and Krishna very happily accepted them because he could understand like the love that was saturated, that how she was so saturated with love in her offering.
And enjoyed it.
So it's quite a contrast, right? So again, it underlines the principle.
And this is and this is a very, like, for chanting, for kirtan, for or for individual chanting, it's a very good, it's a principle that to apply, is that it really, in when we chant together, when we chant individually, a lot of it, a lot of our experience, it depends on our can depend on our mood in approaching it. So the more, like, the more we can be into the chanting, sincerity, whatnot, then the deeper and greater the experience that we can
Right.
have.
Yeah, this is a really good example. Like it doesn't like say when we're chanting, say kirtan, for example, our voice could be like a banana peel. Right?
Yeah, good.
But
Yeah.
but
Wow.
Krishna will take that and love to reciprocate with that. So and we'll
Because
feel that.
the Krishna, the supreme person, actually, what, and he's interested in relationship, and specifically he's like, he really, like, relishes the mood of the relationship. And
Yeah.
so, like, yeah, wow, the banana peel voice, I like that.
Right. All right. So I'm glad we went into that commentary there.
Yeah, so for anybody out there who, does kirtan, and what, or, does kirtan, it does not matter if your voice is good or bad, or whatever you think of your voice. It's the intention, it's the situation of the heart. And that's, in kirtan, that's what matters. So anybody can do it. Anybody can do it.
And it's nice how these principles are so transferable from one situation to the next.
Yeah.
So text 19.
Yes.
Okay, so not only Krishna's family and friends came out, because Dwarka was a largely inhabited place. There was many people living there. At the same time, many hundreds of well-known prostitutes began to proceed on various vehicles. They were all very eager to meet Krishna, and their beautiful faces were decorated with dazzling earrings, which enhanced the beauty of their foreheads. Kind of like random, isn't it? Like out of unexpected moment. So now it's being described that the prostitutes, there's a verse particularly making this point. So
Right.
it's important, right? It's important, and like the Srimad Bhagavatam is 18,000 verses or so. And so each one of these chapters is trying to capture a moment, but very succinctly.
Right.
It's not like, it gets into great detail about all kinds of stuff. There's just enough detail so that the teachings can actually come forward from the text. But here it's important enough that this is mentioned in this chapter. And I'll read from the commentary of it. Even to date, there are many prostitutes in great cities of India who are sincere devotees of Krishna. By tricks of chance, one may be obliged to adopt a profession which is not very adorable in society. but that does not hamper one in executing devotional service to Krishna. Devotional service to Krishna is uncheckable in all circumstances. And then it's quite a long commentary, so I'm trying to choose the key points here. This is like interesting, isn't it? And because when we think of like generally, I'm not saying everybody thinks like this, but in society, at this time and possibly at the time of the Bhagavatam as well, prostitutes were not maybe held in high regard in society.
Mm-hmm.
But Prabhupada and the verse itself is pointing out that such things do not really impede bhakti in the least. It may, we don't know people's life circumstances about how they got into certain situations. Like we don't know why it is that people end up in certain situations in life. And Prabhupada kind of like sums that up by saying, by tricks of chance, one may be obliged to do something, right? It doesn't have, right. Could be anything, maybe not necessarily being a prostitute, anything, but we can't judge people based on external things like that. We don't know the course of people's lives, which puts them in certain situations. And the point that's being underscored here is that whatever situation a person might be in, there's no impediment for that person. That person should not be judged as not being able to, not qualified somehow for bhakti.
Yeah, this is a beautiful point about spirituality. It's just that, like, when our our mentality is more absorbed in the physical, the external situations of the world, then we judge like, this person's better, this person's worse, this is a better thing, this is a worse thing, but when someone who has a developed spiritual consciousness, all the material situations, because they're all situations, they're just situations, just like I live in this apartment or I live in this apartment, it's just a different situation. So whatever we're doing or whatever, it's just a situation. And for someone who's developed in spiritual consciousness, it's like none of that matters. One's not higher or lower. And this comes out in the Gita, where it says like a fully self-realized person doesn't, like, gold, pebbles, this thing, that thing, which we may think this is valuable, this isn't, to them, they see it all the same. All the same. And so without spiritual vision, you have to like make distinction like that. But with spiritual vision, it's there's no distinction, and you can actually see everything equally. You can actually see everyone equally. And without seeing the spiritual component, without seeing the soul within the situation, then you can't have that equal vision. So,
and that extends even beyond human beings. Like we started off by talking about cows, right?
Right.
But also like all forms of life, ultimately aren't judged as being one better than the other in terms of spiritual quality. Like I'm trying to become conscious of this myself. I'm trying to practice seeing other living entities as spiritual beings. And so the place that I live in is like, it's a bit of an older house. And so in older houses, you got like, along, not all the seams and the walls and stuff are exactly perfect anymore, right? So you've got like, occasionally I'll have like, a spider living over there, that kind of thing, right? And I used to think I was quite compassionate to the spiders, and I would put them in a cup and I'd take them and I'd, walk 10 feet out or something and put them out in the grass or someplace where I thought they'd be happy. And then I stumbled across this I don't even know how I came across this, but it was like, you can't really put indoor spiders outside because they're a different
Okay.
species. They,
Interesting.
you put them out there and they're like, they're not happy. They're not probably not even going to make it. And because they're just not equipped, they don't have the same features,
I see.
bodily
I see.
features to make it out there. And so I was like, oh no, what am I going to do now? Like, so I've actually been trying to like, manage a relationship with a spider if it's in the corner over there and stuff. Cause like I don't want to kill it. Right. Um, so, I mean, it's a good practice. It's a good
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah.
And so we can at least do that for human beings,
Right.
at
Right. Right.
least.
And this is like our, in terms of our equality, if it's not on the spiritual platform, it always has a boundary. It's like I unconditionally love, this person or this group of people or this, group of living entities, but it always has a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
It always has like something happens outside of that. Oh, that's too much, that person's out or whatever, you know. And so until somebody comes to a spiritual consciousness, spiritual understanding, then you know, we can't have this full sense of equality.
I got I got a relevant experience that relates to this verse.
Yes, go ahead.
And it was one of those days when we were off uh, in a city somewhere, and we were chanting. This particular day, I had Bhagavad Gitas with me, and I was standing and talking to people who were interested in getting a Bhagavad Gita, right? So as I was standing there, it was like it became like at noon when people started coming out of their offices and stuff, and the streets started becoming really busy. And at one time, it just became like a rush of people, and I was just standing there, and I just turned around or I turned to my side or something. There was this woman looking at me, and she approached me, and we started talking a little bit, and she was very interested in the Bhagavad Gita that I had there, and it turned out that she had found books that had been written by Prabhupada, in fact, it might have been the Bhagavatam in a used bookstore. And so she had been reading some of these books and had become quite interested, and so we started talking, and then so we were spending some time in the city, and over the course of, I don't know how long we were in that city for, but we got to know her more, and it turned out that she was actually a prostitute, and she had gone into like a used bookstore, found some of these books, and it really impacted her. She was like really impacted by the teachings in the books, and then she had looked in the back of the book and had found a number there. Like, if you want more books, you can call this number. But the number was like Los Angeles. This was in a Canadian city in British Columbia. And it wasn't Vancouver. It was like more in the north. And so she called the number and ordered some books. And then she got to know the people on the other end. She kind of explained her situation to them, and they developed a relationship together, and so she became so grateful for the teachings that she started giving monthly donations to the temple that was in California at the time. I mean, Los Angeles. So she was a prostitute, but and decided that she wanted to give some of her money to support the teachings, like was her in her mind, right? Here's people who are supplying this, and she wanted to give money to the temple. Eventually, we became friends, and myself and a few others, we went over to her place to because we actually had become friends after some time speaking and whatnot. And she was obviously very sincere, and she had quite a depth of understanding of what the teachings were. And she was actually chanting every day. She had beads. She was chanting. She had like sadhana. She got to the point where she was like full on practicing bhakti. So she invited us over to her home, and we went into her place, and her apartment was like a temple. You went in there, and there was like images of Krishna and spiritual imagery throughout her place, and you could see like there was a lot of intention and consciousness. Her profession didn't change. She that was her profession, and she continued to to give money, and she was to the temple, and was very, very enthusiastic. And that was, so I mean, for me it was like, wow, it's just right out of the Bhagavatam. This person was in what, for whatever reason, in an occupation, is very difficult occupation, actually, very, very dangerous as well. And and at that time when I met her, which was like 20 years ago, she would have been older. Even she would have been like, for she would have been, well, probably around my age, maybe a little, maybe in her 40s or something. And yeah, like what a person, and very strong person, and very, very fixed in her spiritual life, very, very dedicated. But that was her profession. So it was just a real eye opener for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like, and that's the thing, is that life is kind of like life is can be like that, where we don't have so much influence on what situation we find ourselves in. And so but it's, which the point being brought out here, it's not an impediment to spiritual development. You're in a situation, you may not be able to do anything. Don't I guess, if you can't change it, don't focus on it. Focus on spiritual development. And as a result, as a result of focusing on bhakti, you know uh, they say Krishna is the Bhagavad Gita says he's the supreme controller. So as a result, your situation may develop into something different. And but yeah, it's not that, I guess that's really the point being brought out here. It's not an impediment.
Yeah, no impediment.
Doesn't mean that we don't try to have the best situation for our spiritual development, because certain, like for instance, that situation, like, is I can see it not being always very supportive of a spiritual life. So it's not an impediment, but at the same time, there are situations which are, some situations are more favorable for spiritual advancement than others. But if you're strong enough, it doesn't matter. And sometimes that is the way in which life works, is it gives us situations that we actually have to go deeper. We have to go dig deeper inside to develop as a spiritual person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you get right down to it, whether a person's a prostitute, or a politician, or a CEO, or whatever, they're all equally impediments. If we're not if we're not somehow trying to express and develop our spiritual,
Yeah.
side, our propensities.
I just like to bring out one other point here, that's like, this is a very fundamental teaching of bhakti, and I think it's the first teaching that you read about in the Bhagavad Gita, is that our identity is not material. We actually have a spiritual identity. We're a soul within a material situation, and the material situation, and when I say material situation, I mean like either our physical body and then whatever, is related to that around. It changes. It's constantly changing. But we actually don't, we are not, our identity is not involved in the material situation. It is right now when we're not completely spiritually conscious. We are very much identified with our material situation, but the teaching is there that actually it has nothing to do with us. And so this is another reason why it's not an impediment, developing spirituality, because actually the material situation it just has nothing to do with us. And someone who's in pure spiritual consciousness, any situation, they'll be like, okay, how can I use this for, my spiritual development, or what we're talking about here? How can I use this in relationship with the Supreme? How can I use this situation to serve the Supreme in some way, shape, or form? And there's no situation in which you can't do something to
exactly
serve the Supreme. Just on your one last point.
Yep.
Just in the yoga process, generally what you see is that control of the senses means to not engage them. It means to stop the senses from engaging.
Yeah.
Whereas in the bhakti process, the point is to not stop engaging the senses, but to engage the senses in the service of the Supreme, or to engage them in a spiritual way. And and so therefore the bhakti process, you can accommodate all of these different situations, because it's about engaging any situation in the proper. Any situation can be engaged in the service of the Supreme somehow.
Nicely said. Well, that was really interesting.
Yeah,
we went through different, took a few different turns there, and that there's a lot to dig out here in these verses and commentary. That was really interesting. I'm going to spend, I think the thing I'm going to meditate mostly on the rest of the day are the cows. So I'm going to take with me today, especially.
It's so nice. So nice. Cows in terms of animals, they really have what I've found is they have the greatest capacity to reciprocate emotionally with human beings. Like any other animal, a cat, a dog, there's some emotional reciprocation there. But a cow, they're just like their ability to reciprocate with human emotions is amazing. And you'll never know that unless you can actually spend time with cows that are protected, that don't have any fear of humans.
Okay, Brihat, next week we want some cow stories, okay? You go see those cows, and then you come back with some stories for us.
Okay.
Thanks, Brihat.
Thank you.